She had 3 seconds. 3 seconds to choose between staying invisible or saving a stranger's life. 3 seconds that would change everything. Her name was Rachel Turner. Single mother, 3 jobs, barely surviving. She wasn't looking for trouble. She wasn't looking to be a hero. But life doesn't always ask what you're looking for. Sometimes it puts you in one impossible moment where you have to choose who you really are. And Rachel. She made a choice that saved a billionaire's life and put her own daughter in danger. This is her story. And I promise you, by the end, you'll never look at a simple act of kindness the same way again. Let me tell you about a moment. Just one moment. 3 seconds that changed 2 lives forever. Her name was Rachel Turner, and if you passed her on the street in downtown Seattle, you wouldn't notice her. She liked it that way. Being invisible meant being safe. At 27 years old, Rachel had learned that lesson the hard way. She was a single mom to a beautiful little girl named Sophie, just 7 years old, with missing front teeth and a laugh that could light up the darkest room. Everything Rachel did was for Sophie. Every smile she forced when her feet ached. Every double shift she took when she wanted to sleep. Every penny she saved in the envelope under her mattress. Rachel worked as a waitress at the Harbor House, one of those fancy restaurants where rich people eat meals that cost more than most folks make in a week. Crystal glasses, soft music, food with names you can't pronounce. But Rachel wasn't thinking about any of that beauty. She was thinking about her daughter, waiting at home, about the rent due next week, about the nursing school dream that felt so far away. That rainy October night started like any other. Rachel moved to the dining room like a ghost, refilling water, clearing plates, staying quiet. Then he walked in. His name was Jonathan Blake. Even if you didn't know who he was, you could feel it. The power, the wealth, the way the whole restaurant seemed to straighten up when he entered. He was young, maybe 30, in a suit that probably cost more than Rachel's car. A billionaire, the kind of man who owned buildings and companies, whose decisions affected thousands of lives. Rachel's manager pulled her aside. "You're serving the private room tonight. Mr. Blake and his business partners." Perfect service. Absolute silence about anything you see or hear. "Understand?" Rachel nodded. She understood. The private room was beautiful. Dark wood, low lighting, windows overlooking the Seattle waterfront where rain drummed against the glass. 5 men sat around the table. Jonathan at the head, watching everything with sharp, intelligent eyes. Rachel served water, then wine. She brought food and cleared plates. The men talked business, big numbers, investments, territories, the kind of talk that happens when millions of dollars are on the table. And Rachel stayed invisible. But something felt wrong. Her instincts, sharpened by years of surviving, of reading people, of knowing when danger was near, those instincts were screaming. One of the men was named Victor Lang, younger than the others. He'd arrived late, apologizing, shaking Jonathan's hand like they were old friends. But Rachel saw something in his smile that didn't reach his eyes. Something in the way his shoulders were too tight, too controlled. She pushed the thought away. Not her business. Not her problem. Then it happened. Rachel was refilling water glasses when she saw it. Victor reaching across the table, pointing at some papers, drawing everyone's attention, his other hand passing over Jonathan's wine glass. Just for a second. And in that second, Rachel saw something drop from his palm into the deep red wine. Time stopped. Her heart hammered. Her mind raced. Had she really seen that? Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was medicine. Maybe she was imagining things. But the way Victor's eyes darted around, checking if anyone noticed, the way his hand moved so smoothly, so practiced, Rachel knew. She knew with absolute certainty that something terrible had just happened. And in about 30 seconds, Jonathan Blake would raise that glass to his lips. Rachel thought of Sophie, 7 years old, waiting at home. Sophie needed her mother, needed Rachel to make smart, safe choices. Walking away now would be smart, would be safe. But Rachel also saw Jonathan's face, a human being, someone's son, maybe someone's brother. A person who had no idea he was about to drink poison. Her body decided before her mind could stop it. As Rachel moved past Jonathan's seat, her elbow knocked his water glass. Perfectly clumsy. Believable enough to be real. Ice water cascaded into his lap. "Oh my God!" Rachel gasped, the shock genuine even though the action wasn't. "I'm so sorry." "I'm so sorry." Jonathan stood immediately, water dripping from his expensive suit. The whole table went silent. One man laughed, but Jonathan wasn't laughing. He was staring at Rachel with an intensity that made her breath catch. "It's fine," he said quietly. "Accidents happen." Rachel's hands shook as she grabbed towels, as she brought fresh water and a new wine glass. As she reached for the contaminated glass, Jonathan's hand caught her wrist. Not painful, but firm. "Leave it," he said softly, his eyes locked on hers. Rachel nodded and stepped back. She watched as Jonathan pushed the wine glass aside, out of reach. Then he turned back to his guests like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Rachel knew it. And from the sudden tension in Victor's shoulders, he knew it too. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. When Victor excused himself to the restroom, he came back pale and sweating, looking like he might collapse. "Just felt sick," he muttered. "Must be the flu." The dinner ended early. The men left, but Jonathan stayed behind. Rachel was clearing the private room when she felt him in the doorway. She finished her task before turning to face him. "That was quite a spill," he said, his voice neutral. "Yes, sir. Again, my apologies." Interesting timing. Rachel's hand stilled. Denial seemed pointless. This man saw too much. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "accidents happen at the right moment." The corner of Jonathan's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. He pulled out several $100 bills and laid them on the table. "For the inconvenience," he said. "Sir, I can't." "You can, and you will, because what you did tonight was worth far more than a few $100s. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Be careful, Rachel," he said softly. "Some people don't forget acts of kindness, but some people don't forget witnesses either." Then he was gone, and Rachel stood alone, wondering what she'd just done. Rachel tried to go back to normal. She made breakfast for Sophie, walked her to school, worked her shifts at the cafe. But everything felt different. She kept looking over her shoulder. The same car outside her building 2 days in a row. A man in a dark jacket on her bus 3 times in 1 week. Was she imagining threats that didn't exist? 3 days after the dinner, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Miss Turner, my name is Andrew Cole. I'm calling for Mr. Blake. He'd like to meet with you." Every instinct told Rachel to refuse. But that practical voice in her head, the one that counted pennies and calculated costs, spoke louder. "When?" she heard herself ask. That evening, Rachel met Jonathan at a quiet coffee shop. He stood when she entered, a gesture that seemed old-fashioned. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I'm not sure I had much choice." "There's always a choice." They sat. Rachel ordered water, keeping boundaries clear. "I had the wine tested," Jonathan said quietly. "Concentrated poison. Enough to cause a heart attack within 20 minutes. You saved my life." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. "Victor has disappeared," Jonathan continued. "Empty apartment. Disconnected phone. Probably in another country by now." "I don't understand," Rachel whispered. "Why would he want to kill you?" Jonathan leaned back. "My father built an empire. Real estate. Technology. He was brilliant but ruthless. Made enemies. Did things that weren't always legal. When he died, I inherited everything, including the expectation that I'd run the business exactly like him." He paused. "But I didn't want that. I've been trying to change things. Make the company legitimate. Clean up the damage. Victor and others saw my reforms as weakness, as betrayal. So they tried to remove me." Fear gripped Rachel's chest. "What does that mean for me?" "It means they're going to wonder why their plan failed. They're going to want to know if you saw something." Jonathan's eyes were serious. "You might be in danger." "I have a daughter," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "She's 7 years old. She needs me. I know about Sophie. I know she's in second grade. I know Mrs. Chun watches her when you work. I know you're saving for nursing school. Tears burned Rachel's eyes. You had no right. I had every right to know about the woman who saved my life. Jonathan slid a business card across the table. This number reaches me directly, 24 hours a day. If anything seems wrong, if anyone approaches you, you call immediately. I don't want this. I don't want any connection to your world. Then help me end this threat. Once they're dealt with, you can go back to your life. Rachel took the card, her hand trembling. That night, at 3 a.m, Rachel heard someone testing her doorknob. She froze, heart pounding. A soft knock, then footsteps retreating. A text came from Jonathan's number. My security just confronted someone outside your building. Male, 30 years old. Claimed he was looking for apartment 5B. Your building only goes to 4F. Are you and Sophie okay? Rachel typed back, we're fine. Scared, but fine. The response was immediate. Pack a bag. Enough for a few days. I'm moving you somewhere safe. I can't just leave. I have work. Sophie has school. Call in sick. Sophie can miss a few days. This isn't negotiable anymore, Rachel. Someone just tried to get into your apartment. Rachel looked around her small home, the place that represented everything she'd fought for. But she thought about that doorknob turning, about someone trying to get in. She typed, 1 hour. We'll be ready. At 5 a.m, Rachel woke Sophie gently. Sweetheart, we're going on a little trip. Where? Sophie blinked sleepily. Somewhere safe. Somewhere nice. But we need to go now. Okay, can Mr. Buttons come? She held up her stuffed bear. Mr. Buttons definitely comes. A black car pulled up outside. A professional-looking woman showed identification. Miss Turner, I'm with Protective Services. Mr. Blake sent me. They drove for an hour, leaving the city behind. Eventually, they turned into a long driveway leading to a beautiful house surrounded by trees. The kind of place Rachel had only seen in magazines. Jonathan stood on the porch, coffee in hand. As Rachel stepped out with Sophie in her arms, the morning sun breaking through the trees, she felt like she was crossing a line she could never uncross. Welcome, Jonathan said quietly. You're safe here, both of you. And despite everything, Rachel believed him. Over the next 2 weeks, Jonathan worked methodically. He uncovered conspiracy through evidence, financial records, phone calls, proof he could take to the right people. The threat dissolved. You're safe now, Jonathan told Rachel one morning. You can go home. Rachel looked around the house that had become strangely comfortable. And then what? I'd like to help with nursing school, Jonathan said. Tuition, living expenses while you study. I can't accept. It's not charity. It's an investment. You saved my life. Let me invest in yours. Why does this matter so much to you? Jonathan was quiet, staring into his coffee. My whole life, people have wanted things from me. Money, connections, power. They smile and calculate what they can gain. He looked up. But you risked everything for a stranger. You expected nothing in return. You reminded me that goodness still exists. Tears filled Rachel's eyes. I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't. That's what makes it extraordinary. Rachel thought about Sophie, about the future she wanted to build, about second chances and unexpected kindness. Okay, she whispered. Okay. 6 months later, Rachel walked into her first day of nursing school at the University of Washington. She wore new clothes. Not expensive, but nice. Clean. Her textbooks were paid for. Her tuition covered. For the first time in years, she could focus on learning instead of just surviving. In the audience at orientation, Sophie sat with Mrs. Chun, waving enthusiastically. And in the back row, barely visible, sat Jonathan Blake. He'd kept his distance over those months. A phone call here, a coffee meeting there. He respected Rachel's boundaries, understanding she needed to build this new life on her own terms. But he was there when it mattered. Their friendship grew slowly. built on respect and understanding rather than romance or obligation. Two people from completely different worlds, connected by one moment that changed everything. Rachel threw herself into her studies. Anatomy, physiology, patient care. She worked harder than she'd ever worked. But this time it was different. This time she was working towards something, not just running from something. Sophie thrived. Better school, better neighborhood, more time with her mom, who wasn't exhausted from 3 jobs anymore. The little girl who used to worry about her mother now laughed freely, dreamed big, believed anything was possible. 3 years passed. Rachel graduated top of her class. She got a job at Seattle Children's Hospital, working in pediatrics, helping sick kids, being the person she'd always dreamed of becoming. At her graduation, as she walked across the stage in her cap and gown, she looked out at the crowd. Sophie, now 10 years old, was on her feet cheering louder than anyone. Mrs. Chun dabbed at her eyes. And Jonathan was there too, clapping with genuine pride. After the ceremony, Jonathan found her. "Congratulations, Nurse Turner." Rachel smiled. The title still felt wonderful. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "Yes, you could have," Jonathan said firmly. "You would have found a way. You always do. I just made the path a little easier." "Why did you do all this?" "Really?" Jonathan looked at her for a long moment. "You remember what you told me about the woman at the shelter who helped you leave your ex? How she gave you a phone number and you never saw her again?" Rachel nodded. "You said, sometimes people come into our lives exactly when we need them. They do what needs to be done, then they're gone." Jonathan smiled. "But I didn't want to be gone. I wanted to see what happened next, to watch you become the person you were always meant to be." Sophie ran up, throwing her arms around her mother. "Mama, you did it. You're a real nurse now." Rachel hugged her daughter tight, feeling the weight of how far they'd come. From that tiny apartment where they counted pennies to this moment. Graduation, a good job, a future that looked bright. "I did it, baby," Rachel whispered. "We did it." That evening, they all went to dinner. Rachel, Sophie, Jonathan, and Mrs. Chun. They ate and laughed and told stories. As Rachel looked around the table, she realized something profound. Her life hadn't been saved in one dramatic moment. It had been saved over and over. By the woman at the shelter who'd given her that phone number. By Mrs. Chun, who watched Sophie for next to nothing. By her own stubborn refusal to give up. And yes, by Jonathan, who had turned a single act of kindness into a partnership that changed everything. Later, after Sophie fell asleep in the car, Rachel and Jonathan stood outside her apartment building. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing in me." "Thank you," Jonathan replied, "for reminding me what matters, for showing me that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to make the world better." "So what happens now?" Rachel asked. "Now you live your life. You help sick children. You raise an amazing daughter. You become everything you were meant to be." He paused. "And maybe, if it's okay with you, I'll check in sometimes. Make sure you and Sophie are doing well." "I'd like that," Rachel said softly. They stood in comfortable silence. Two people who had walked very different paths, but found unexpected common ground. "You know what I learned from all this?" Rachel said finally. "What?" "That one choice can change everything. One moment of courage. One decision to do the right thing, even when it's scary. It ripples out in ways you can never predict." She looked up at the stars. "That woman at the shelter never knew what happened after she helped me. Never knew she saved 2 lives that day, mine and Sophie's. And when I spilled that water glass, I had no idea it would lead to all of this. The universe has a strange way of connecting people who need each other," Jonathan said. Rachel smiled. "Maybe that's the real story. Not about danger or billionaires and waitresses. It's about how we're all connected. How one person's kindness creates waves that touch lives they'll never even know about. And how the smallest act of courage can change the world," Jonathan added. "Or at least change 2 worlds," Rachel said. "Yours and mine." As Jonathan drove away, Rachel went inside and checked on Sophie. Her daughter slept peacefully, her stuffed bear tucked under one arm. completely unaware of how different her life could have been. Rachel stood, watching her breathe, counting blessings. A good job, a safe home, a future full of possibility, and an unlikely friendship with a man who had started as a stranger and become something more, not romance, but something equally valuable: mutual respect, shared understanding, the bond between two people who had saved each other's lives in different ways. She thought about that woman at the shelter, wondered where she was, hoped she knew, somehow, that her small act of courage had created this. A nurse who would help hundreds of sick children, a little girl who would grow up safe and loved, a life that mattered. "Thank you," Rachel whispered to that unknown woman wherever she was. And then she made a promise. She would be that person for someone else. When she saw someone struggling, someone scared, someone who needed help, she would act. She would be brave. She would spill the water glass. Because that's how the world changes. Not through grand gestures, but through ordinary people making extraordinary choices in small moments. Through kindness rippling outward like waves on water, touching lives we can never fully measure. Rachel Turner had been invisible for so long, but she wasn't invisible anymore. She was a nurse, a mother, a woman who had found her courage and used it to save a life. And in saving that life, she had somehow saved her own. A final word. We all face moments like Rachel's. Times when we see something wrong and have to choose. Act or look away. Help or stay silent. Those moments matter. Courage doesn't always look like fighting dragons. Sometimes it looks like a waitress spilling a glass of water. Sometimes it looks like a stranger handing someone a phone number. Sometimes it looks like choosing kindness when fear would be easier. You have that power too. Every single day. You never know how far those ripples will reach. You never know whose life you might save. So be brave. Be kind. Be the person who acts. Because the world needs more people like Rachel Turner. Ordinary people who make extraordinary choices in crucial moments. The world needs you.